don't think it was ever really inevitable that guitar would be a part of my life. I was always surrounded by music. My father's music taste in particular was a big influence on me. He was a huge Stones fan, Beatles fan, T-Rex, Steve Winwood. There was always music on around the house, whether it was Muddy Waters or Stevie Ray Vaughan. So there was always music to some degree that was guitar based, I guess. So I guess it was inevitable that I would be a fan of guitar based music at the very least. Not necessarily, I'm going to pick up and play guitar. That wasn't really a given. There was always a guitar around the house. My father knew 3 chords on the guitar. I never had the heart to tell him that at least 2 of those were the same chords, just played with different fingers. But there was always a guitar around the house, so I guess to that extent it was always somewhat inevitable that I would gravitate towards it at some point. But there's a lot of barriers in between that and actually trying to forge a musician as a guitar player, whether you're any good at it being one of those barriers. So luckily I seem to be kind of doing okay at it, I guess. So yeah, still finding out whether I want it to be a part of my life, if I'm honest. Trying to develop your voice on the guitar is a huge part of actually learning your instrument. I think there's probably a little bit of an unfair focus on that from a very early age. In this day, in this day and age, you see a lot of guitar players being derided for being derivative or sounding like they're heroes. It is inevitable to a point. And I went through that. I was a huge Slash fan, I was a huge Stevie Ray fan, I was a huge Clapton fan, and all of those influences ultimately kind of culminated in me sounding like the player that I am today. I think one kind of slightly unusual path I took maybe for a guitar player was being a huge fan of vocalists, whether that's, again, my parents' influence for the most part, or even my grandparents' influence. So, Sam Cooke or Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, Aretha Franklin, Carole King, all of these amazing vocalists who had an ability to beautifully tell a story. Going through a point trying to figure out how to emulate that and how to actually try and sound more like a vocalist on the guitar and maybe less like a guitar player. I think that has probably been somewhat crucial to me developing my voice as a musician and really figuring out how to be fluid and how to convey what it is that I'm trying to say. But it's sweet, it's very kind that people seem to kind of connect with what I do. Ultimately, I can only sound like me. No matter how much I try and sound like other people who are considerably better musicians than me, I'm stuck with sounding like myself, for better or for worse. I think a huge part of that is trying to emulate vocalists in some way, shape or form. When it comes to gear, I try not to be too hyper-focused on it. I think us guitar players can be very guilty of going down the rabbit hole of, it has to be this amp, or it has to be this pedal, or it has to be this guitar, or these pickups, or these cables, or these strings. There's so many variables that we get a little bit caught up in. And ultimately, these things are just conduits. They're a way to kind of more meaningfully express what you are trying to say, ultimately. And for me, the Revstar has been a huge part of that, undeniably. I would like to think that I would pride myself on, being able to pick up any guitar to a degree and having something to say on it, but there is a lot to be said for having a guitar or having an instrument that you feel comfortable on, whose scale length, whose tension, whose sound that you know and trust and feel like is a part of you. And to that extent, the Revstar probably feels like the guitar that I've bonded with most. It is, the one guitar that I feel like I pick up and it's identifiably me, and it's really is like an extension of myself at this point. So as much as I wouldn't necessarily say it's been crucial, it has absolutely been, kind of at the heart, I guess, of me developing my voice as a musician. When it comes to guitar influences, I guess the usual suspects to a degree. It was my dad's record collection for the most part. It was Clapton, it was Stevie Ray, it was Rory Gallagher, someone who doesn't get anywhere near enough credit in my book. Slash, as I mentioned before, was a huge influence. No one particularly outside the box, I guess, kind of Keith Richards, like I said, the usual suspects. I guess if there is anything slightly unusual or identifiable in my playing, it's more than likely come as a consequence of chasing down that vocal fluidity of great singers, As I mentioned, any number of the vocalists which I aspire to try and kind of emulate in some way, shape or form. But guitarist-wise, nobody that I could really point to and kind of blow your mind in terms of, I wouldn't necessarily have expected that as an influence. Derek Trucks, I guess, more recently. That vocal fluidity and freedom that he has with a slide guitar, I think is just incredible. And, ultimately, again, that boils down to him trying to sound like Aretha Franklin or Otis Redding or any number of incredible soul singers. It's that vocal fluidity and kind of expression, I guess, which I'm chasing ultimately. So yeah, Cardinal Black, my band, just released an EP, Markham of Valencia. It's kind of anticipating a new record coming out at some point in 2025. To be honest, we'd kind of been working on the assumption that we would more than likely be self-releasing the record ourselves, as we did with the first record. But we did a tour of the US over the summer, or at least a couple of short dates. We played the Troubadour in Los Angeles, played the Basement East in Nashville, all of which went incredibly well, infinitely better than we'd ever expected. And as a consequence, lots of quite exciting, albeit very boring kind of business things kind of started happening in the background in regard to not only getting us back to the US, but plans to kind of release the record ultimately. And I think it's a record that I'm very proud of. I think we've spent a lot of time and money on, and probably deserves a bit of a bigger release than we were actually capable of giving our first record. Our first record was entirely DIY. It was entirely self-released, which is great to a degree, but obviously there's limitations in that. There's only so much that I know about marketing because I'm a guitar player. I'm not a marketer, unfortunately. But there's a couple of things happening behind the scenes, which basically meant that we thought we'd try and use this EP, which is essentially 3 tracks from the record, use it as a little bit of a stopgap to try and tide people over, give people a little bit of a taste of new music, something that they could kind of wrap their ears around prior to us going on tour later this year and early kind of next year, with a view to releasing the records as soon as humanly possible. But as soon as third parties get involved, it's kind of out of your hands, unfortunately. Playing the Troubadour was about as close as a dream come true that I've experienced to date, I guess. As you kind of mentioned, huge Guns N' Roses fan, huge Slash fan, and obviously that venue was particularly integral to their story. It was their first show. They played no end of shows there relatively early on in their career, not to mention any of the other incredible artists that have played there over the years, whether that's Carole King, whether it's James Taylor, whether it's Joni Mitchell, whoever. It's got an incredible pedigree. So to be some small part of that, a very small part of that, was genuinely a dream come true, and we were embraced in a way which we went above and beyond anything that we ever expected. It was sold out about a month in advance, so there seemed to be an anticipation to see myself and see the band, which was particularly exciting. So knowing that you're turning up at a show which is not only seems to mean a lot to you, but seems to mean a lot to other people, and that they've actually wanted to go out of their way to buy tickets and travel from states far and wide to come and see you was incredible. It was, as I said, a genuine dream come true, which is a little bit of a cliche, but it was fantastic, really cool. I wish there was a more interesting story behind the name Cardinal Black, to be honest. We get asked this a lot, and I should really think of something more interesting. It was primarily came from Ryan Adams and the Cardinals, which was obviously a band that Ryan Adams had at some point. which we were all fans of, and we all liked the name Cardinal. We thought that was quite a cool name, and it would be cool to kind of incorporate that into a band name at some point. An early suggestion was Cardinal Black and the Autumn Dogs, but that was a little bit long and a little bit kind of convoluted, so we thought, well, Cardinal, 3 syllables, kind of feels like it should probably be followed by something short and punchy and sharp, so 1 syllable, so we started looking at 1-syllable words, and Black was suggested, so yeah, I wish there was a more interesting story, but it's essentially 2 words that we thought sounded quite cool. The initial choice of the Revstar was quite a aesthetically driven one. I remember walking into a guitar shop in Cardiff in South Wales just after they'd been released, seeing it on the wall and just falling in love with it, purely from an aesthetic point of view. I thought it was such a cool looking guitar. I liked that it wasn't obviously derived from anything else. Most new guitars these days, in some way, shape or form, you can see their lineage from a Strat or a Tele or a Les Paul or one of those kind of classic instruments, but there was just something, kind of instantaneously new and fresh about the Revstar, which I thought was particularly cool. I liked its feature set, being 2 P90s and a wrap over tailpiece. That's what I gravitated towards. I think probably my dream guitar, should I ever be able to afford one, is a kind of 1954, 1955 gold top Les Paul, gold with that wrap over tailpiece. So that was kind of the choice behind the custom shop model, in terms of its appointment and its colour. But I just thought it was such a cool, kind of ergonomically simple and effective guitar. 3-way switch, volume, tone, 2 great pickups, and that's it, and no gimmicks. Everything else is just down to you and your fingers. So, yeah, I think P90s are just criminally underrated. They're such a versatile pickup. I think because of the chronology of where they came in terms of being superseded by the humbucker later on, people tend to think of the P90 as a little bit of a lesser pickup to some degree. Oh, it buzzes, or it's an earlier design, or whatever. But they just have that girth and size and grit of a humbucker, but with the delicacy and the articulation of a single coil, of a Strat single coil, or whatever. So they're just such a versatile pickup. So you put that, or those, in a Revstar, a guitar which I kind of, instantly was attracted to. I thought it was such a cool combination that, I was destined to love it, I think. Helix, to some degree, has been a pretty integral part of my rig for a while now, whether that's the full Helix or whether it's the HX Stomp or the HX Stomp XL, which is incorporated into my kind of touring pedal board. Line 6 have always done effects incredibly well, going back to the M9 years ago, whether it was reverbs or delays or modulation. They've always done that kind of thing incredibly well, so it felt like a very sensible kind of natural evolution of that to incorporate that into my pedal board to some degree. And then, the Helix and the IRs and the amp simulation is just an extension of that, really. So whether it's fly dates, where we're kind of shooting in and out of different countries to play festivals or whatever, and it's not wholly practical to be carrying heavy gear around with you, the Helix is invaluable in more scenarios than one, really. It's such an incredibly versatile bit of kit. Yeah, we'd absolutely love to tour in Italy. I've played in Italy quite a lot with various clinics and masterclasses and all that kind of stuff. Used to holiday regularly here as a kid. I absolutely love Italy. It would be amazing to come out here at some point. We've got pretty extensive plans for 2025 to be quite a heavy touring year. I haven't told my wife yet. I shall tell her when I'm home. But we're going to be going back out of the US. We're going to be around Europe, all around the UK as well, I imagine. So I'm very much hoping that Italy is part of that tour itinerary, because it's just a beautiful place, and every time we come here I get much fatter than I was before I arrived in the country. So if nothing else, I'm coming for the food, and if we play some gigs, great. Bonus.